All right, we're in disco. Let's count down.
I don't know.
Done?
Yeah.
Okay, everybody. So, glad you're here. Little cleanup to do before we get started. Hi, guys. Couple things. So this place is opening back up tomorrow, so their meetings are going to interfere with what we need to do. So I need to find, and the Western Club's not going to open for a couple of weeks. So I need to find another place to use. So if anybody has any ideas, let me know, and then we'll post it on the Facebook page so you'll know where to go next week, because we can't finish in time for their meeting here. That's number one. Number two, so it's kind of funny to me that I had about 5 or 6 people correct me and tell me what I said wrong last week. And they were right on the money, of course, and they're right on it. But the funny part to me is nobody does their homework, but they're all ready to...
Quick to tell you what's up. Huh?
So when I was talking about the Wizard of Oz last week, I said that the Scarecrow was looking for a heart and he was looking for a brain. I mixed up the Scarecrow and the Tin Man, and I didn't realize it. I was just talking, and that's what came out. And I got about 5 or 6 calls after that from all parts of the world. Ah, you're the Scarecrow looking for a brain, not a heart. I went, okay. Why don't you do your homework too? Yeah. So I stand corrected. The Scarecrow was looking for a brain and the Tin Man looking for a heart. All right. So, okay. Has anybody got any questions on their 4th step? Any questions on the resentments, the fears, sexual conduct, the harms to others, and how we do the 4th step and how we go over it? Did that all make sense to you? How we check it and utilize that very powerful tool? Okay. No questions there. All right. So, then let's go back to the book. And we're on page 72. So it says, having made our personal inventory, what shall we do about it? We've been trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship with our Creator, and to discover the obstacles in our path. We have admitted certain defects. We have ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. We have put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. Now these are about to be cast out. This requires action on our part, which, when completed, will mean that we have admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects. This brings us to the 5th step in the program of recovery mentioned in the preceding chapter. So, we admit to God, to ourselves, and to another human being. Do you understand why we admit to God, to ourselves, and to another human being? Everybody get that? No. A hush fell over the crowd.
Would it be to get their perspective or their experience? Straight out?
Not so much. You know, your perspective on my troubles might worsen my shit, you know.
To me, it's more or less like about honesty and truth. Because if I'm, I can say some stuff, to myself or whatever to make me feel good. But if I'm admitting some things to you or another person in my higher power, then I'm accepting the fact that, there's more truth to it.
Okay. You remember when we started and we did the triangle and the circle? And we went through all the things that really means, right? And one of them was to learn, to love, and to serve. The recovery part is to learn. The tradition part is to love, and the service part is to serve, right? So we admit to God for forgiveness. We admit to ourselves for understanding. And we admit to other human beings for humility. with forgiveness, understanding, and humility, we are in that circle of to love, to learn, to serve. Does that make sense to you? The center of our lives is spiritual, if you're in the program of recovery, okay? So first we talk things over with God. That makes sense, doesn't it? If this is a spiritual program, then the first thing we're going to do is talk things over with God. The second dimension of our life is our minds. So we look at this in this way. That's the way we look at it. And the third dimension is with other people. So we talk to another person about it. Does that make sense to you? We were designed to rely on God and other people, with us in the middle. Okay? So what Bill is saying is that this requires action on our part, which when completed will mean that we have admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being. So we talk to God. If the center of our lives is spiritual, so the first thing we do is talk to God. And if I'm looking for understanding, I look at how my mind has been working. And I have it all written down for me, so it's easy to go over and check out, right? Oh, one other thing I forgot, and for those of you that are watching here, the Scott that does our YouTube, it's being recorded for YouTube tonight, and it'll be recorded next week, but it won't be up on YouTube for 2 weeks. When Scott comes back, he's out of town, he'll put them up on YouTube. So you're just stuck with, if something happens to Facebook, you're SOS, or SOL. SOL, right? Shit out of luck, right? Okay.
We're all familiar with that.
All right, so this is perhaps difficult, especially discussing our defects with another person. We think we have done well enough in admitting these things to ourselves. There is doubt about that. In actual practice, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. So looking at my inventory and going over it with myself, don't forget, self-will doesn't fix self-will, right? And so the sickness that I have is my thinking, right? And I can't use my thinking. I need outside help. I need to bring God in. I need another person's perspective on that. And it's also a good degree of humility to share with another person how low I've gone. You know, because we want to try to save our face and our ass at the same time. That's really hard to do. Many of us thought it necessary to go much further. We'll be more reconciled to discussing ourselves with another person when we see good reasons why we should do so. The best reason first. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. So, what this is saying, if I don't do a fifth step, I may get drunk or I may get loaded again. So, if that's true, then what's the best reason to do a fourth step? What would be the best reason to do a fourth step?
To get through the fifth.
That's right. I can't do a fifth step until I've done a fourth step. So you want a good reason to do the fourth step is you need your fourth step to do your fifth step. And if you don't do your fifth step, you're probably going to get drunk. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. Time after time, newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives. I'm going to take this one to my grave. I'm never going to share this with anybody. Nobody's ever going to know that I did this. Trying to avoid this humbling experience, they have turned to easier methods. Almost invariably, they got drunk. Having persevered with the rest of the program, they wondered why they fell. We think the reason is that they never completed their house cleaning. They took inventory all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock. They only thought they had lost their egos and fear. They only thought they had humbled themselves. But they had not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense we find it necessary until they told someone else all their life story. So, you hear a lot in the rooms about people going back out on the fourth step, right? And that never made any sense to me. And it shouldn't, and the people I've always sponsored, I've always shared with them to not promote that kind of stuff in meetings. And if you know people that I sponsored, you'll see that they really don't promote that in the meeting. Because it's not true. The fourth step is the most, that's the step everybody goes back at. First of all, our literature tells us the only step we have to do 100% is the first step. Okay? And the foundation of the program of recovery is the first two steps. It's that level house that we have that we're going to build on. Okay? So if that be the case, then what is the fourth step? So people don't go back out on the fourth step. What this is saying is they really go back out on the fifth step. That's what we just read. So they go back out because they don't want to look somebody in the eyes and tell them what they did. They don't want anybody to really know who they are and what they've done. So they try to hold on to that shit, and that gets them drunk. For me, you know, I'm born and raised on the streets, right? So I had kind of a code in my life when I got sober. And when I came in and looked at the steps, everybody said, oh, look at that fourth step, and look at that, this step and that. When I looked at the fifth step, I said, no way. I ain't doing that shit. First of all, telling on myself and telling somebody else, no, that ain't happening. No, I can't do that. So here he says, what was that? More than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. I led a triple life, maybe a quadruple life. He is very much the actor. To the outer world, he presents his stage character. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but knows in his heart he doesn't deserve it. Can you guys relate to that? It's pretty powerful, really. The inconsistency is made worse by the things he does on his sprees. Coming to his senses, he's revolted at certain episodes he vaguely remembers. These memories are a nightmare. He trembles to think someone might have observed him. As fast as he can, he pushes these memories far inside himself. He hopes they will never see the light of day. He's under constant fear and tension, and that makes for more drinking. So I had, just to briefly tell you, I said I lived a double life. I really lived a triple life, or maybe a quadruple life. But so I was, had a wife and kids, right? And I never worked for a living. I never had a job. I was 2 years sober the first time I ever had a job in my life, right? 35 years old. And I made my money on the street. So the people that I made my money with were kind of old-fashioned, and they were against drugs. So I had my home life and then my secret life on the streets with the people that I was involved with. And then I had a secret life from the secret life because I needed to get high. So that was another whole set of people and places that had nothing to do with the people and places that I did my everyday business with. And so I was kind of juggling, and I didn't want this family to know about this, and I didn't want this to know about that. They would have killed me for that. And I didn't want any of them to know about that. And I didn't want any of them to know about the others. And that was my life. And I just thought that was quite normal, really. I didn't think there was any. When I got sober and started looking at all this stuff, I said, damn, I did that for 30 fucking years. 20 years for sure. I lived like that. All right. So, to the outer world, he presents his stage character. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but he knows in his heart he don't deserve it. The inconsistency is made worse by the things he does on his sprees. We read that already, didn't we? Psychologists are inclined to agree with us. We have spent thousands of dollars for examinations. We know but few instances where we have given these doctors a fair break. We have seldom told them the whole truth, nor have we followed their advice. Unwilling to be honest with these sympathetic men, we were honest with no one else. Small wonder many in the medical profession have a low opinion of alcoholics and their chance for recovery. We must be entirely honest with somebody if we expect to live long and happily in this world. So I know a friend of mine used to say that his sponsor had died, and he said, as soon as his sponsor died, he said, I need another sponsor because I got to have one person walking this earth that just knows what kind of a real piece of shit that I really was. Rightly and naturally, we think well before we choose the person or person with whom we take this intimate and confidential step. You notice he says person or persons. Plural, right? So some, and I think he goes on to explain that here. Let's see. Those of us belonging to a religious denomination which requires confession must, and of course, will want to go to the properly appointed authority whose duty it is to receive it. Though we have no religious connection, we may still do well to talk with someone ordained by an established religion. We often find such a person quick to see and understand our problem. Of course, we sometimes encounter people who do not understand alcoholics. So, my experience is that it's best to do your fifth step with somebody in the program that understands this whole process, okay? And that a fifth step is not really, I go there and talk for 3 hours about my whole life. It's an interaction back and forth between your sponsor and yourself, and you know, and pointing out things that they need to highlight for you, and that kind of stuff. Now, having said that, that's what I did with half of my, or more than half of my inventory. The other half of my inventory I went to a priest. I'm born and raised a Roman Catholic anyway. So when I went to confession, I walked in there and I sat down and I said, bless me, Father, if I have sinned. It's been 20 years since my last confession. Lock the door, we're going to be here for a while. And there's a funny story that I share all the time, but it's funny now. It wasn't funny then. So I shared, see, because even though my sponsor was a guy that I had been in prison with, and when I went to the hospital for treatment, he showed up with an AA meeting, you know, and I thought he was dead. But anyway, so he knew all about me. But I didn't get sober to spend the rest of my life in prison. There's no immunity, people. So you gotta be real careful. There's two things we gotta be careful at. When we find God, that's what we do here in recovery. That doesn't come along with the lobotomy. Okay? We're still who we are. And the steps of this program help to change us. So just because we found God and we're on the spiritual path doesn't mean we're somebody different. You know, we're very capable of being and doing what we've always been and done. And so you got to watch out for that. But the other end of that is I didn't come into recovery to spend the rest of my life in prison. So I wasn't about to share certain things with another human being. So I did it with a priest because there's a confidentiality there that he can't break. Okay? And so I tell you the story. You've probably heard it before. I share it all the time. But what happened for me was I was with the priest for a good couple hours, an hour and a half or so. And I told him some things that I did. I told him a lot of things that I did, you know. And when I was done, you know, I didn't want to hear how many Hail Marys and Our Fathers I had to say and all that stuff, because I really believed that was beyond redemption, you know. But when I was done, I said, Father, do me a favor, please. I'm going to get up and leave. I don't want you to come out of there for 5 minutes. And after I shared with him what I had shared with him, I knew he would listen to me. He wouldn't get up and come out of there. And I got up and I left. The next day, I'm in my neighborhood. Now, my neighborhood where I'm born and raised is all one-way streets, okay? And so I'm sitting outside on a sidewalk at a little cafe with a friend of mine. We're having coffee, and I'm watching like I always watch. I'm watching who's coming up the street, okay? And I have spent thousands of days and nights sitting at that cafe there. And so I'm sitting there, now I'm sober, I just did my fifth step yesterday, and I see, all the way up the block, I see an unmarked police car, detective car, coming down the street. And my first thought is, the fucking priest gave me up. And I'm watching, and they slows down real slow, and they double park right in front of the cafe. And I'm sitting there, and I'm actually thinking, do I need to get up and run? I was young and skinny when I got sober, so I could run. Can't run today. And I'm thinking, Danny, you should get up and run. You should get up and run. That fucking priest gave you up. And they double parked, they both got out of the car, and they started walking into the cafe, and they both looked at me and my friend. They knew who we were. They went in and got coffee and came out and got in their car and left. And I thought, the whole time, I thought they were there to get me. There's a friend of mine that he used to share that he was driving one night and there was a roadblock. We alcoholics, we're strange people. And there was a roadblock and he went, oh shit, and he just fucking nailed it and busted through the roadblock. And they caught him and they arrested him, and when they finally had him in the car, they said, why'd you run the roadblock? And he said, well, I didn't want you to catch me. They said, who are you? The roadblock was not for him. But that's, our minds, our minds lie to us. They don't tell us the truth. It's our paradigm, right? And our paradigm is warped. And so I'm sitting there just getting ready to get up and bolt, swearing that that priest gave me up. And here comes the detectives, and they walk right by me. So it took great courage for me not to get up and run. That's how real it was. So, of course, we sometimes encounter people who don't understand alcohol. We do some weird shit. If you stick around long enough, you hear enough fifth steps, you're going to hear some weird shit. And one thing while we're talking about this, there was, years ago, we used to have pool parties and barbecues at my house all the time. And we were having a barbecue one day, there was lots of people there, 40 people or so, jumping in the pool. And this guy, I don't even know who he was, he came up to me and he said, can I talk to you? And I said, yeah. He just came here or something. And he said, I need to share something. I need somebody to share with. I'd like to share with you. And I said, what do you want to share? And he said, well, I killed this guy. I said, don't say another word. Don't say another word. I don't want to hear it. So it's important that you understand, don't be part of that stuff. When I first got sober, some people that have been sober a long time, they might be familiar with the case. In New York, there was a guy that was in AA, went back out, and in a blackout, he went and killed his, I think his ex-wife or somebody, in a blackout. And he shared it in a meeting with 2 or 3 people in the meeting. And when he finally got arrested, these people got subpoenaed and they came to court. And the first guy got up on the stand and he tried to take the 5th. And the judge says, no, you can't do that. And he said, well, it was confidential. This was shared in an AA meeting. The judge says, I don't care where it was shared. You don't have that right. You either answer the questions or you're going to jail. It was a big case. That was like in 1992 maybe. Might have been 91, but that's a real deal. So you don't want to hear that kind of stuff, okay? You don't want to hear that. So nip that off in the bud if you can. So he says, if we cannot or would rather not do this, we search our acquaintance for a closed-mouthed, understanding friend. Perhaps our doctor or psychologist will be the person. It may be one of our own family, but we cannot disclose anything to our wives or our parents which will hurt them and make them unhappy. We have no right to save our own skin at another person's expense. Such parts of our story we tell to someone who will understand, yet be unaffected. So here's another reason why you want to do, you might want to use more than one person to do your fifth step, right? It's not about breaking the law where you're going to go to jail or you know, worrying about somebody ratting you out for something you told them. This is about kind of, I don't want to say normal stuff, but normal for us people that you can't share with your wife or your parents, so you share it with somebody else in the rooms. As long as you talk to somebody, that's the thing. The rule is we must be hard on ourselves, but always considerate of others. That's pretty self-explanatory, right? Notwithstanding the great necessity for discussing ourselves with someone, it may be one who is so situated that there is no suitable person available. If that is so, this step may be postponed, only, however, if we hold ourselves in complete readiness to go through it at the first opportunity. We say this because we are very anxious that we talk to the right person. It is important that he be able to keep a confidence, that he fully understand and approve what we are driving at, that he will not try to change our plan, but we must not use this as a mere excuse to postpone. So if you're having trouble finding somebody, and listen, I used to do this group up in Edmond that I think some of them are actually on here right now. That I used to do all their fifth steps for them. They used to send all the people in fifth steps, they sent to me. And I don't know why, but so there's always somebody, I said that to tell you that there's always somebody around that's capable of doing your fifth step or sponsee's fifth step. You know, there's always somebody that you can get to listen to that. So he says here, when we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. We have a written inventory and we are prepared for a long talk. We explain to our partner that what we are about to do and why we have to do it. He should realize that we are engaged upon a life and death errand. Most people approached in this way will be glad to help. They will be honored by our confidence. So now what do? We pocket our pride and we go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. And that's one of the things in the big book that I find not to be true, for me. When I did my fifth step, I was not delighted, I was paranoid. And I know I'm not the only one. I know other people that felt that, but the majority of people are delighted, and they feel at peace, you know. But I was not. I can't remember anymore how long it was. It was at least a month or so before I felt okay about what I shared with somebody. But I was certainly not delighted. It says we can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel that we are on a broad highway, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. Not true for me, none of that. None of that was true for me. So, and I share this because I want you to understand, if it's not true for you either, that's okay. You know, again, the majority of people that may be true for, but it's not set in concrete. That has to be like that. No. Again, I was nothing like any of this that day. I didn't feel at peace with myself and one with the world. I wasn't free. I was fucking paranoid. I was looking over my shoulder. I thought, I can't believe I just told this guy this thing. So, it was quite nerve-wracking for me. I wasn't walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. I was ready to get up and run. Okay, so now there's 8 things in this next paragraph that you should make note of. So the first thing says, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour, carefully reviewing what we have done. I don't know too many people that actually have done that. It's a good practice to do. You know why? Why do you think it's a good practice? Because the book says so.
Good answer.
Follow the directions in the book. That's a good idea. So the book tells you to go home and pull your dusty big book off the shelf and dust it off and go over the first 5 proposals. Okay? So the second thing it says for you to do is to thank God from the bottom of your heart that we now know Him better. Okay? That's a direction. These are directions that it's given you here. Taking the book down from the shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. So that's the third direction. You take your big book and you open it up to page, what is it, 58, I think? And you read. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we have omitted anything, for we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. So you take the book down, you go to the 12 steps, you read the first 5 proposals, and you ask yourself what? Well, the 5th direction is our work solid so far? The 6th direction I ask myself, are the stones properly in place? What does that mean? Is our work solid so far? Have I done these first 5 steps according to the direction, honestly, to the best of my ability? I didn't say perfect, honestly, and to the best of my ability. Are the stones properly in place? Did I leave anything out? Or did I tell part of a story and not the rest? That's the stones not properly in place. I gave you, on my 5th step, most of the story, but I left out that I screwed the guy and put the money in my pocket. I just said, it turned out to be a mess. It was money. Yeah. So, are the stones properly in place? The 7th direction is, have we skimped on cement that we put into the foundation? So, the analogy again is he's building a house. So if I skimped on the cement, then did I just go light-handed on this? Did I not go all in on these first 5 proposals? Not just the 5th step, but all the first 5 of them. Have I skimped? Did I really do an honest look at my exercise for step 1, my exercise for step 2? Did I really take a look at my self-will in step 3? Was I really convinced that any life lived on self-will could hardly be a success? Did I really do a 4th step honestly and put everything down? Or have I tried to make mortar without sand? And that's what he's asking us. Anybody got any questions on that? Any comments? Anything? Anybody ever experienced something with this step that they weren't quite sure about?
It took me a while.
I can't hear you.
But after I did did my 5th step, and I've done it a couple times because I have a couple different sponsors, but I didn't, I did it twice with AA sponsors, and I didn't have that overwhelming sense of relief after it was over either. And you're the first person that I've heard actually say that they didn't, because when I'm sitting in meetings, I hear people say that all the time, oh, it was such a relief. Well, I didn't have that.
Yeah.
It took me a while for that sense of relief to come.
Yeah. So look what he says again. Go back to the second paragraph on page 75. We pocket our pride and go for it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we're delighted. Well, no, I wasn't delighted. That's not right. We can look the world in the eye. No, I can't look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. No, paranoid like hell. Our fears fall from us. No, I had more fears because I just shared with somebody something I should never have shared with anybody, right? We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. Didn't feel Him anywhere around. Okay? We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. Not my experience. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strong. But you know what is true about everything I just read? After my initial shock and paranoia wore off, and again, I don't remember how long that was, maybe a month or two. Well, one day I just realized, wow, I'm free of all that shit. I'm okay with all of that.
Yeah, my fifth step experience, I was real stressed out. You know, by the time it was all done,
Yeah.
I didn't feel any better, you know.
Yeah. So that's the experience of a lot of people. I think the majority of people feel what the book is describing. And it doesn't make them any right or better than the rest of us. But that's just their experience, and this is just my experience. And that's all we have is our own experience, right? So it's important when you're working with people to ask them how they're feeling after the fifth step, you know, and let them know it's okay to not feel great or not feel at peace with themselves and one with the world, or they can look the world in the eye, you know, all that other craziness, you know. May not be that for them. But if they were honest, and here's the key, if they've illuminated every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past, if they've done that, then there's going to come a point when you're going to feel okay, and you're going to feel better. Does that make sense? So in the 12 and 12, on the first page in step 5, it says, so intense, though, is our fear and reluctance to do this, that many AAs at first try to bypass step 5. So because we have such a strong fear and reluctance, after we've done it, we still have a degree of fear and reluctance. So that's kind of normal, right? I'm looking for something in here. On page 58 in the 12 and 12 is, if you have your 12 and 12 with you, is the greatest definition of the word humility for us. Okay? And so it says in the first paragraph, another great dividend we may expect from confiding our defects to another human being is humility, a word often misunderstood. To To those who have made progress in AA, pay attention to this. To those who have made progress in AA, it amounts to a clear recognition of what and who we really are, followed by a sincere attempt to become what we could be. Therefore, our first practical move toward humility must consist of recognizing our deficiencies. No defect can be corrected unless we clearly see what it was. But we shall have to do more than see. The objective look at ourselves we achieved in step 4 was, after all, only a look. Remember I shared with you about going through your bureaus and your drawers and your closet and laying out all the stuff that you don't think will fit, right? It's just a look. Now you got to get rid of these things. Stop lying to yourself that one day you're going to fit this again, right? All of us saw, for example, that we lacked honesty and tolerance, that we were beset at times by attacks of self-pity or delusions of personal grandeur. But while this was a humiliating experience, it didn't necessarily mean that we had just acquired much actual humility. So now he's telling you the difference between humiliation and humility, right? Though now recognized, our defects were still there. Something had to be done about them, and we soon found that we could not wish them or will them away by ourselves. So again, what I wanted to point out to you was in step 5 of the 12 and 12, the definition of humility. To those who have made progress in AA, it amounts to a clear recognition of what and who we really are, followed by a sincere attempt to become what we could be. And that's what humility is. A clear recognition of just who and what we are, followed by a sincere attempt to become what we could be. It's really powerful. It's a great definition. And the other thing I want to bring up on this here is on the bottom of page 59 in 12 and 12. So he's talking, of course, about the inventory process. He says, hence it was more evident that a solitary self-appraisal and the admission of our defects based upon that alone wouldn't be nearly enough. So when I look at my own shit, I can't see the whole picture. And I've been lying to myself and to everybody for years and years and years. And that stuff is burnt into my brain. And so for me to look at my own shit, it's not going to accomplish very much, right? We'd have to have outside help if we were surely to know and admit the truth about ourselves. The help of God and another human being. And so that's why we go to God and another human being. I need help to see the truth about myself. So, no matter what, I got to realize that only God has the ability to see the whole truth and nothing but the truth. We have blinders on where we can't see the whole truth. So unless we incorporate God, and a way that we incorporate God too is hearing other people. Somebody honestly telling them what they see in us. You know, if you're sponsoring somebody and you're trying to be nice and not offend them, you know, you're not really helping them. I'm not saying you have to be nasty, but are you really helping them if you don't want to, you know, upset them? So he says, only by discussing ourselves, holding back nothing, only by being willing to take advice and accept direction could we set foot on the road to straight thinking, solid honesty, and genuine humility. Yet many of us still hung back. We said, why can't God, as we understand Him, tell us where we're astray? If the Creator gave us our lives in the first place, then He must know in every detail where we have since gone wrong. Why don't we make our admission to Him directly? Why do we need to bring anyone else into this? So what do you think the answer to that is? Why do we need to bring? Why don't God just show us what's wrong with us? And why do we need to Why don't we make our message to Him directly, and why do we need to bring anyone else into it? Anybody? Was that a look that you have a comment there, Melissa? No? Well, did God give us free will? Do you believe God gave us free will? Does anybody not believe that? Raise your hand if you don't believe that. So everybody believes that God gave us free will. So if God really gave us free will, then He gave us the right to be wrong, didn't He? He gave us the opportunity to do the wrong thing. You think He made a mistake by giving us free will? God don't make mistakes. So it's not God's job to do the work for us. It's our job to be willing to grow towards the likeness of God and to grow towards align our will with the will of God. That's our job. If God did it for us, then we wouldn't do it. And if God did it for us, we would feel a little something from it, and then we'd be our old self again. So God doesn't interfere in our lives where we don't want Him to. I always say that. I say that, to me, God is such a gentleman, He'll never interfere in my life where I don't want Him to. So how do I tell God what I really want Him to? It's not by what I think or what I pray. It's by what I do. My actions are what's telling God what I really want from Him. Or what I really want from me. More to the point. Does that make sense? So let's read the rest of this. It's interesting. So he says, at this stage, the difficulties of trying to deal rightly with God by ourselves are twofold. Though we may at first be startled to realize that God knows all about us, we're apt to get used to that quite quickly. Somehow, being alone with God doesn't seem as embarrassing as facing up to another person. So I could find a little corner in my house and talk to God and have no humility in the process. Or no humiliation process, right? Until we actually sit down and talk out loud about what we have so long hidden, our willingness to clean house is still largely theoretical. You get that? That's important. When we are honest with another person, it confirms that we have been honest with ourselves and with God. Does that bring it back home for you now and make you understand what we're doing here? The second difficulty is this. What comes to us alone may be garbled by our own rationalization and wishful thinking. The way we've been lying to ourselves for years, right? The benefit of talking to another person is that we can get his direct comment and counsel on our situation, and there can be no doubt in our minds what that advice is. Going it alone in spiritual matters is dangerous. How many times have we heard well-intentioned people claim the guidance of God when it was all too plain they were sorely mistaken? This must be a God thing, right? Must be a God thing. I can tell myself it must be a God thing and do something that I know is not right. Because I'm telling myself it must be a God thing. But if I run it by somebody else and say, they ain't God in that, Dan, what's the matter with you? Lacking both practice and humility, they have deluded themselves that they were able to justify the most arrant nonsense on the ground that this was what God had told them. That's a powerful sentence. Let me read that again. Lacking both practice and humility, they have deluded themselves and were able to justify the most arrant nonsense on the ground that this is what God had told them. It must be a God thing. It's a God thing. It is worth noting that people of very high spiritual development almost always insist on checking with friends or spiritual advisors the guidance they feel they have received from God. Surely, then a novice ought not lay himself open to the chance of making foolish, perhaps tragic, blunders in this fashion. While the comment or advice of others may be by no means infallible, it is likely to be far more specific than any direct guidance we may receive while we are still so inexperienced in establishing contact with a power greater than ourselves. So you get that? Somebody, it's a weird thing that happens in the rooms of AA, CA. If I had a problem or an issue, and I walked into this room, and I separately asked 5 or 10 people what they thought, I might get some crazy, insane feedback. I might get some good feedback. But I might get some off-the-wall shit too, right? But those same people in the room, when the meeting started, if I brought that problem up in a meeting, you know what I would get? I'd get all real good spiritual advice. That happens every time. Same people, but collectively, something happened and something changed and something was different. And I got real good, clear direction. So if you got something going on, throw it out there. You know. And the longer you stay sober, the more used you are of telling on yourself and admitting things that you thought, I'd never tell anybody that. It's easier and easier, really. It should be easier and easier because you shouldn't be causing a whole bunch of wreckage as you stay sober and grow spiritually, right? So once you get rid of all that crazy stuff that you brought here, then it's a lot easier to as we go along, okay? All right. Anybody got any questions on that? Anybody got any questions on the first 5 steps? Let's say this is our time to sit down and take the book off the shelf and dust it off and look at the first 5 proposals and ask ourselves those questions. Are we skimping on mortar in the sand? Have we put enough cement? Are all the pebbles in place? Anybody have any questions on the first 5 steps? Any question at all, whether we talked about it or not? I find it hard to believe that nobody has a question on any of the steps. Come on, we got about 10 minutes to kill.
I don't really have a question, but I know there's something that you said one time before that I repeated often, and it was kind of what you were just reading, and it was, we get to decide who we want to be by figuring out who we don't want to be.
Yeah, in recovery we get to create whoever we want to be. But we can't create who we want to be until we first understand who we don't want to be.
That was really powerful to me.
Well, and that's the process of recovery. It's taking a look at who we were and what didn't work for us and what we don't like about ourselves and not wanting to be that anymore.
Well, it simplified it. It just made it more clear cut.
It is. It's very clear cut. It's very precise. We can become whoever we like to become. But first we have to understand who we don't want to be anymore. I don't want to be someone, you know, and sometimes the things are difficult and very involved, and sometimes they're quite simple. I just don't want to be a phony. I don't want to be a fake. You know? I don't want to hurt people. Doesn't mean that I'm not a phony or not a fake or that I don't hurt people. But if I'm conscious of that, and that's in my spiritual plan, then that is at an absolute minimum. Because I'm trying to create somebody that I want to be. And there's no room for the old Danny and who I want to be today. Who else got a question? Come on, 1 or 2 questions and we're done. Aha, you have a question?
No, I said I'm shooting blanks.
That's another whole fellowship
You
there.
have to put that on your steps.
That's a good thing, right?
That's another whole fellowship there.
I got my stimulus though.
You looking for a date?
I'm shooting blanks.
All right.
That's a good thing.
He's looking for a date.
I don't know.
Anybody got a question on any of the steps? No? Going once. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Any advice? Sorry, go ahead. Any advice for doing your first 5th step?
Doing your first 5th step? Yeah, we just gave you all the advice in the world. How could you ask that question?
I'm talking about some real dandy shit.
Some real Danish.
It's an hour's worth of damage.
Yeah.
I wrote it down.
You want more?
All right,
Hey, you asked me. I'm
just be
asking-
honest. Be honest
There you go. Okay.
and let it all, just throw it all up. If you got anything that's gonna lock you up, don't tell it to a priest. Don't tell it to another human being. Find somebody, find a man of the cloth that can't rat you out and give it to him. A lot of us got, and listen, we're not, we don't come in here as saints, right? And so a lot of us have shit that we gotta be careful about, Again, I didn't get sober so I could spend the rest of my life in prison. So, I ain't gonna be sharing shit to some people. That's just the truth. So yeah, just be honest and let it all go, man. Get rid of it all. You're only as sick as your secrets. You've heard that before? Yeah. And you know what secrets are for? Secrets are for people that can't handle the truth. So if you got secrets, get rid of them, man, because they'll eat you up. Okay, so next week, I don't know where we're going to meet at. We have to try to figure that out. Deb?
Could we meet here and make it at 6?
We can meet here at 6. Can you guys make 6 o'clock?
I can.
I can make it at 6 o'clock.
Can anybody not make 6 o'clock next week?
Next week?
So then it's a done deal.
Because if it's at 6, then it's over at 7, and that won't interfere with me.
No, if we meet here at 6, it's over at 7, and can you guys meet at 6 o'clock?
Yeah, 6.
We got run by the.
Okay. Then we will meet here next week, so everybody, if you want to show up, we will be here next week, but the meeting will start at 6 o'clock, and we'll post that. And then, hopefully in 2 weeks, we'll be back at the Western Club. Okay, everybody, then that's it. Thank you, appreciate it.
Oh. Oh, okay.